I start time, I'd just like to thank everyone for making this debate possible. Obviously, our opponent, my lovely partner, and this whole audience. I'm very shocked that this happened. This is only our first tournament, so please forgive my nervousness. I affirm the resolution. The current levels of U.S. income disparity do more harm than good. To clarify the round, and as the affirmative, it is both our opportunity and our burden to define some terms to clarify the round. So we'd like to define current levels as level in the status quo right now. We'd like to define income disparity as the extent to which income is unequally distributed. Does more harm than good. Is more detrimental than beneficial. There's no standard for this round, as it is a fact round, so the team with the most evidence that this is true shall win the round. Our first contention is that most of the money is going to the least. The United States has the largest economic gratification between the richest and the poor, because the United States possesses the wealthiest in the world. It's also anti-American to have such little people with so much money, as our founding fathers wanted equal opportunity for everyone in this nation. Now, we'd like to clarify the affirmative stance. We are not advocating socialism, but rather we want equal opportunity, not necessarily equal income. Yes?
Wouldn't you acknowledge just that the framers of the Constitution wanted equal opportunity, not necessarily equal outcome?
Yes, which is, again, we're not saying that everyone needs to have the same income. That is simply just not realistic. But what we are saying is that everyone in this country should have equal opportunity, or at least more opportunity than they are given right now. Our second contention is that income disparity leads to turmoil. Now, when food prices go up, 10% more of the population are protesting. When food prices rise 10%, protests double in our nation. So Occupy Wall Street has proved demonstrations of shoplifting, rioting, and disrupting because of this fact. I'd like to bring up another point that economists Jared Bernstein and Paul Krugman state that it is incompatible and unsustainable with real democracy to have these levels of income disparity. An imbalance of rich and poor is the oldest and most fatal ailment to all republics. Therefore, we shall avoid this first of all. Our third and final contention is that income disparity inhibits education. Now, 40% of total income goes to 10%, just 10% of the United States population. Now, in public schools, those with less affluent neighborhoods and very poor neighborhoods with little money receive less of a comprehensive education because of their lack of funding and resources. Moving past required education, moving on to college, right now, you need money to go to college. Sure, financial aid is available, but what's going to happen is that this debt follows you around for the rest of your life. Now, if you can't get a job, then that means less innovation in the American economy and a cycle of unemployment. So, to sum up the affirmative stance, what is happening when you have a cycle of economic disparity is that people who are born poor are never able to better their standard of life because everyone is stuck in a caste system. Therefore, for all of the reasons presented, we urge a very strong vote in the affirmation. Thank you very much.
Is this a good place for me to be? Right here? Yeah. Okay, great. All right. Is everyone ready? Since they did off time as well, I'd like to just give a thank you to everyone here as well. We're very thankful to be here and thankful that you're all watching. Let's jump right in. All right, judges. So to give you a quick roadmap, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through framework, their case, our case. Let's go to the framework. We basically agree with everything. Yeah, that's great. We agree with everything. Let's jump into their case. Their first contention is that more money, the most amount of money is going to the least. Okay, I have two refutations of this. The first is that they're kind of referring to taxation, even though they didn't really say it, and that shouldn't be relevant in today's debate. The idea is that it's current levels of U.S. income disparity, not where that income or where the taxes from that income go to. So the idea of what they're referring to, taxation, isn't really relevant. And then my sub-B refutation to this is that they said everyone should have an equal opportunity. Yeah, we agree. Everyone should have an equal opportunity. Why the affirmation loses this point is because they gave you no internal link. They didn't prove to you that right now it's not equal opportunity for everyone. They didn't prove that to you right now. We as a negation believe right now it's equal opportunity. Everyone has the same chance to make the same amount of money, and there's no disparity with your equality of opportunity. They can't win this point because they didn't provide a link to prove to you that there is no inequality of opportunity. Their second contention is that it's just kind of like when food prices go up, there's 10% increase in 10% protests, and the idea is that when prices get higher, people protest more. We would turn this by saying protests are great. Protests are an excellent thing. In a democratic country, protests are a grassroots movement that mobilize our country, that move our country forward. If this disparity is causing protests and causing Americans to voice their opinions, that's something that's beneficial. That's something that's causing good, not harm. The idea is that if I go out and protest, if I'm doing this, if I'm engaged in the Occupy protester movement, I'm saying, hey, I live in a democracy and I'm using my democratic rights. That's something that's beneficial, not harmful. The third contention is that they talk about unemployment and debt and how there's decreasing, how there's less funding for education and college is getting more expensive. Again, where's the link to the rich? Where is the proof that the rich are causing unemployment and are causing our debt? The unemployment and debt was caused by past recessions and by the exorbitant amounts of money we spend on foreign policy and whatnot. It's not by the rich. Again, you can't accept the fact that the rich are causing unemployment and debt when they give you no warrant as to why they are causing unemployment and debt. Now, I have two pieces of background before I go into our case of two contentions. My first piece is that we really shouldn't be talking about taxation just if it comes up, because we're talking about income, not the taxes that we levy on incomes. And my second piece of background, and this is something that's really, really crucial, and it provides a lot of refutation to their case, is the idea of poverty mobility. The fact of the matter in the United States is that the impoverished lower classes are still moving up and are still becoming less impoverished. Cite this example. In 1996 to 2000, from 1996 to 2005, 58% of households in the lowest quintile, that's the lowest 20%, moved up to the next quintile. This study was done by the Federal Reserve Bank of 2010. This is the idea that, look, the lowest quintile of our population, the lowest impoverished classes, are moving up to the higher classes. We have economic mobility. It's not like we have the rich and the poor are stuck in their classes. The poor are moving up. We're always increasing. We're always growing. Our GDP is growing up. Our country is moving forward. Why is our country moving forward? In part to the disparities of our income that we have. Let's go into our two contentions. Our first is on innovation. Current levels of U.S. income disparity do more good than harm because of innovation. If we look at Zuckerberg, Gates, Steve Jobs, all of these people couldn't create and innovate until they were financially stable. They couldn't create the iPhone or the PC or Facebook until they had financial ground, until they were saying, hey, I'm doing really well, now I can take a risk. The fact of the matter is, you can't take risks until you're financially stable. They could only create until they had money. Another example of this is Thomas Edison. There were many diaries of Thomas Edison saying he wanted to invent some sort of electricity, some sort of what we now call a light bulb, but he couldn't invent the light bulb first. Why? He was dirt poor. What did he invent first? The phonograph. That was not his first invention, but his first major outbreak. Once he invented the phonograph, he married, had some kids, was able to buy his own property, buy his own laboratory, and then he invented the light bulb. The idea is this: you can't create until you're financially stable, and the creators are those who are in the higher echelons of our income. And it's not just that Bill Gates is creating, but Bill Gates is funding other creators. It's the fact that these people through philanthropy are saying, hey, I want to fund these projects, I want to fund innovation. Because we have this higher class, we have more innovation and we have more growth. The impact on this is, it's growth. It's our future. It's what can move us out of our economic downturn. What's going to move us out of $14, $15 trillion in debt? It's not just higher taxes. It's growth. It's a new product. It's something that all Americans are going to buy. Something that all Americans are going to buy is innovation. It's growth and it's technology. This argument itself weighs out any of the rote facts that the affirmation gave with no links in between them. Let's go into our second contention. Our second contention is philanthropy. Give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish and he'll eat for a lifetime. This is the most vital argument in today's debate. This is the idea that if I'm poor, it's better for someone to say, hey, here's an opportunity to better yourself than giving them a welfare check. This is something that Andrew Carnegie believed in. It's the idea that you don't hand money to the poor. You instead hand them opportunities. This is what the affirmation was preaching about. They're saying equality of opportunity. It's not like we give people money. We want to give them the opportunities. Opportunities like, hey, you want to exercise? Here's money. No. Here's a park. Now go exercise. You want to educate yourself? Here's a library. Here's a museum. It's the idea that we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps like Benjamin Franklin did, like our forefathers did. You pull yourself up because that's what an American is. An American is not someone who needs money handed to them. An American is someone who needs an opportunity given to them, and then they go out and achieve what they need to achieve because of that opportunity. And it all comes from the idea of philanthropy. If we look at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they gave $33.5 billion total so far in philanthropy. And one area that they've given a ton of money is education. They've given $350 million just for the idea that they want to have more teacher evaluations and teacher effectiveness. And they've been very successful in this area. Philanthropy spurs the idea that you can improve yourself and that you don't need to be handed a check and that you are an American and you can pull yourselves up by your bootstraps, just as our forefathers did 200 years before. The impact of this is the most American ideal there is. It's the ideal of self-betterment. It's American advancement. With this, we can increase our GDP, increase our standard of living, and it's a more efficient use of money. Because we have these top people, they can fund into different areas, and then in these different areas, we can improve through innovation and philanthropy. For all these reasons, I ask for the vote in the negation. Thank you.
Again, I'd like to quick thanks for everyone for being here, the judges, my opponents, and of course my partner for making everything possible today. Okay, so to start off the round, I'd like to go over their case first, and then I'll go back over ours. So in their case, they talked about how the lowest classes are moving up, and how there is mobility in today's social structure. And that may be the case for some, but for the vast majority, there is social stagnation in their income and in their place in life. There is not many people who have very, very, very little income, who are on food stamps, who struggle to make a living, that are moving up in society because they don't have the means to do so, which goes back to opportunities, which is what we were talking about earlier. And that really comes out throughout the whole debate is this idea of opportunities and the opportunities in today's society in order to move up. And so as I will prove as I go into my own case, this is not the case. There are not these opportunities for the people at the lower end of the social class and the social income to get up there and to move forward in society in their income. Going into their second contention, which is that of innovation, is that you can't innovate until you're financially stable. They brought up the case of Steve Jobs and of Thomas Edison, and we completely agree with this. You cannot move up. You cannot innovate without financial stability. That just isn't plausible because you don't have the resources to do so. And this is a major issue. And this goes back into why this social stratification does more harm than good. Because the social stratification does not allow for innovation. Those people who don't have the money, who don't have the means to move up in society and have that economic backing, can't innovate, can't provide these changes in our society that we need. And for that reason, the social stratification is a very bad thing. It does more harm than good. Going into their third contention, which is that of philanthropy. And again, it goes back to opportunities. Give the person the opportunity to do something, and they can achieve it. And this is true. But you look at those people who are on the poorer end of this income spectrum, who don't have the means. They most likely don't have the opportunity. They don't have the resources to do these things. I'm sorry, I'll get to you if I just got lost chapter. So going back to that. A lot of people who are poor live in poor neighborhoods or live in poor areas of cities, and there aren't opportunities in those areas that they live in. There isn't this whole mixed match of a city where a poor person is living right next to a rich person who's right next to the middle class section. There's sections divided up by income a lot of the time because of the type of house or the way they're living. People of similar income live closer together. And so in these neighborhoods of poorer income, you don't have these opportunities. You don't have these resources in which you can learn from, in which you can move up. And so for these reasons, the social stratification, again, does more harm than good, because the stratification of these incomes provides less opportunities for those to innovate, to move up. Now we'll go back into my case and strengthen it and prove to you why our points still stand. So going into our first contention, my opponent brought up how it seemed to be that we were implying to taxation and how that really is the case. However, it is definitely not the case. We are talking about incomes here. In fact, many people who are on the higher end of the social spectrum that have the higher incomes are not taxed as heavily as those in the middle class. This is just simply a fact. Sure, the percentage might yield a larger amount, but the percentage that you're taxing of your income is simply not the same. And we aren't talking about taxation. We're talking about income. We're talking about how much they make. And so, for that reason, our point still stands. The most money is going to the least percentage of the United States. And this is just incredibly unfair in many different ways. But as my partner brought up, more than 40% of all income is going to the wealthiest 10%. And this is just anti-American. As my opponents agree, we are talking about more opportunities. In fact, we're not talking about socialism. We're trying to give everyone equal income, but equal opportunity. And that is the ideal here. Yet, if we have this... I'm sorry, I'll get you if I have time. I just really got a lot to get through. If we have this social stratification, then we don't have these equal opportunities. We don't have the equal resources or the means in order to give these people equal chances and allow them to move up in their income levels. We just don't have the means to do so. And so, for that reason, our first contention still stands. Going into our second contention, they talk about how protests are good. By bringing these issues into light, this is a good thing. And yes, bringing the issues into light is good. But the protests themselves are often violent. We brought up Occupy Wall Street. There was shoplifting involved. There was violence by police. I'm sorry, I really just don't have time. There was rioting. There was shoplifting. There was disrupting courts, disrupting these economic activities. This was not a positive thing. This did not bring forth a positive outcome. No change resulted from this violence of the Occupy Wall Street movement. And yet it was a protest. But this does not bring about positive change. It does more harm than it did anybody good to bring this protest here. And so for this reason, our second contention still stands strong. Now going into our third contention, which is that of education. They talked about how we didn't really say that the rich were responsible for this inequality in education. That the rich weren't really the ones making this happen. The social stratification wasn't to blame. But this just goes back into the economic cycle that my partner talked about. If a person is poor and they don't have that much money and they go to a public education where they are not getting as good of an education because they lack the resources that someone of a wealthier neighborhood in a wealthier school might have, they will not get as good and comprehensive of an education as someone who did go to the wealthier with more resources school. And this leads to a lack of education, but also then you have this lack of money and you can't afford college. As long as the economy starts dripping, financial aid is getting cut. So even those who might qualify for financial aid, with this drop in the economy, they may now not qualify because their needs are being cut. And so now they can't go to college. If you don't have a college education, that totally blocks you from being an innovator because you don't have the education to back that up. You don't have the knowledge or the know-how to be able to innovate. You don't have the means to do that. And so this just leads to a cycle. These people who don't have college educations, now they're marrying and their children are poor. And they go to a school where they don't have as great of an education. And they don't go to college. And it's a cycle. And it almost leads us back to a caste system where you can't get out of the social class that you are in. You're stuck there because the social stratification does not allow you to move forward in society. And so we look at all of our contentions, and they still stand firm. And as my opponent's contentions, I have proven false. And so for these reasons, I urge a strong vote in the affirmation. Thank you.
everybody ready today? Okay, with that, I will start. Judges, once again, on behalf of the opposition team, I want to thank you three for coming out today and making this debate possible. Also, of course, thank you to our audience for being here and supporting both teams. With that, as we know, the motion today is current levels of U.S. income disparity do more harm than good. As the second negation speaker, I'm going to start with the negations case. I'm then going to go into the proposition team's case. My partner presented two pieces of background, and the only background that they seemed to have an issue with was the idea of economic mobility. They said, my partner mentioned this statistic from the Federal Reserve, the United States banking system that develops our monetary policy, that the bottom quintile, 50% of those people in any given year will eventually move up and out of that quintile. Now that's why, this is a great fleshed out piece of evidence, and that was why I was so surprised when the proposition team's second speaker came up and said, oh, people don't move up in society. Now, perhaps that's true. Maybe that is true. But the reality is, in today's debate, the only team that's provided any evidence about this is the negation team. We looked to the Federal Reserve, we found statistics, this is a true number, it's real, and we were able to provide it. While the second speaker may think she's right about that people don't move up, unfortunately she provided no reasoning and no evidence to support her claim. Moving on, though, to the individual contentions, and we'll start with the first one about innovation. My partner brought up the fact that you need financing, you need to be in a financially stable position to create innovation. It takes capital. Now, their second speaker came up and said, she tried to turn it, saying that, oh, exactly, you can't innovate without financial stability. And look, the poor won't be able to innovate. The sad thing is that's true then. They're right. The poor will not be able to innovate as well as the rich. If you're in the bottom quintile, it will not be as easy for you as if you're Mark Zuckerberg, having gone to Phillips Exeter Academy, and now you can create Facebook. It won't be as easy. But here's the reality. If we're looking at what's best for society, it's best to have the disparities. Because social innovation, technological innovation costs money. If everybody made the same, I'm going to take the inverse of this situation. If everybody made the same exact money, let's say everybody made $40,000, which if you average the incomes, that's about what every American would make, nobody would be able to innovate. So here's the trade-off. If you vote for the proposition team, you're voting for absolutely no innovation. If you vote for the opposition team, yes, only the innovation will come from the middle class and those with the rich, but at least it's some innovation. And again, if you point back to the background, people in the lower quintiles, they still can move up and eventually get to a better spot where maybe one day they can innovate. Now let's look at the second point, and that's about philanthropy. Now unfortunately, it may have been my fault, but I really got no refutation to our evidence about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, to our argument about Andrew Carnegie and those wealthy bringing society up in a strategic way. Perhaps I didn't get it. The only thing that I got was the fact that there's still no opportunity. This has been the mantra of the proposition team. There's still no opportunity. Our framers wanted economic opportunity, and there isn't any. I'm sitting here questioning, what is the economic opportunity that we don't have? I'll take this school, for example. I go to this school. This school is not a private school. It's not even in Newsweek's top 100 high schools. I sit next to students in my classes that went through pregnancies. I sit next to students in my classes whose parents live in RVs and trailers. This is a great school, though. It's providing opportunity. Yes, are we perfect? Absolutely not. And that's why we should value philanthropy in this debate. But the reality is, America as a nation is better at providing opportunity than any other nation, despite our inequalities in regards to income. Sure, are we perfect? No. But we're better than anything else, and that's what's important. Neither side can provide you absolute benefits that a perfect world, but our side provides you a better world and a better society. Now, let's look at the proposition team's points. And I'll start with the top of the flow, with that most of the money going to the least. And my partner made a reference that we really shouldn't be talking about something like this. This debate is not about taxation. They said, oh, well, we need to talk about taxation because all these tax breaks are bad. Sure, as the negation team, we can still stand up here and say that tax breaks are bad. All we have to do is say that the current levels in income inequalities are actually beneficial. I'm not going to stand up here and say that the capital gains 15% tax is good. I don't need to prove that. If the motion was current levels of U.S. taxation do more harm than good, then that would be a debate where we could have. But all I need to show is that the current statistics that we have right now are good, are beneficial, or at the very least are better than what we would have without them. Now, they also mentioned at this point, again, they said that people don't have equal opportunity. And again, I'm left asking the question, what equal opportunity do people not have? Name something. Talk to me. The only thing I got was college, and many people would say that college is not something that's a guarantee. It's in most countries, it's not a guarantee. They haven't been able to flesh this out. They haven't been able to show us why the framers would be upset in today's world because there's not equal opportunity. They use the framers. We have the public as a whole has so much more opportunity than the framers did when they developed the Constitution and when they coined the term the proposition team is phrasing time and time again in today's debate. Let's look at the second point about food prices going up and this 12 protest points. My partner said, yes, exactly, you're right, and protests are good. They're actually really beneficial. Well, they said protests are bad because they're violent. Okay, come on. Yes, protests get violent. First of all, not all protests get violent. And second of all, sometimes it's good for protests to get violent. That's what started the American Revolution. That's what starts revolutions. I'm not advocating for revolution, but I'm saying that violence is not a sole, it shouldn't nix a point just because it's violent. Furthermore, when they talk about Occupy being bad, I'm somewhat surprised that they say this. Occupy introduced us to the idea that income inequality, that incomes are not equal. Whether you like that or not, we know about Occupy, we know about the Occupy movement as a society, and we know about these inequalities. That's why it's a final round topic at a debate tournament like this. I would argue against what the Occupy protesters are arguing for. I don't think if you followed this debate, I think you would agree that that's probably not the best advocacy, but I'm not going to say that protests are bad. Now, the final point about education, again, I say, where is the link? You say education is bad, but look, universities like Harvard have made it so much more easier than in the past for people to have that opportunity to succeed and to find a better life. The quintiles move up. Please vote for the negation. Thank you.
So before I begin, I'd like to thank everyone once more for being here and watching us. Let's jump right in. As this is the penultimate speech of today's debate, I would like to just take a step back and give you a summary of today's debate and give you 3 voting issues as to why the negation has earned the ballot today. Now, my first voting issue is on argumentation analysis. If we look at a couple of their arguments, I'm going to prove to you that they really don't hold water and that they weren't really complete arguments, or certainly weren't complete in the very first speech. Let's look at a couple of their arguments. One of their arguments, and one that's been made throughout this entire debate, is that there's no equality of opportunity. And this is something we've been trying to hammer out. There's no equality of opportunity. Okay, that's called an assertion. And an argument is made of 3 things: assertion, reasoning, and evidence. After you make your assertion, we need the reasoning and we need the evidence. All you need to do is cite an example, give a situation, cite a statistic, do anything to give us that R or the E, the reasoning or the evidence. Unfortunately, I didn't get any of that. All I just got was, well, there's no equality of opportunity. Where? How? My partner came up. Look, in the schools, there's equality of opportunity. Even when you apply to college, even if you're in the lower echelon of society, there's lots of scholarships out there for you to apply for. I'm in the lower echelon of society, and I'm applying to lots of scholarships, and I'm getting lots of financial aid. It's the idea that, look, our society does have those opportunities for people to have equality of opportunity. What we, however, don't advocate is the quality of outcome. Again, the idea of that there's no equality of opportunity, where is the reasoning or evidence for that? There's another one of their contentions. They said, well, protests, a lot of them are violent or they're not very good. And that wasn't even brought up until the second speech. All we got from the first speech was, well, when food goes up, there's more protests. And again, that was the main basis of their argument. There's more protests. Where's the link? What's the benefit? What's the detriment to protest? What's the detriment of the violence? My partner came up here and said, violence is great protest. Look at the Boston Massacre. That was violent, but that led us on the road to our revolution. You have to link out to us why your argument is detrimental. You have to link it back to harm. And when you define harm as detrimental, how are those protests harmful? And again, I'd also like to comment. We're talking about a little bit has been thrown around about American ideals and what's an American ideal. I would say a protest. I know I said a self-betterment was the American ideal. I changed my mind. Protests are totally the American ideal. And if we're causing protests, we are being more American than ever. This is certainly something that's beneficial for our democracy and for America. We're having people go out there voicing their concerns, saying, I want this changed, and things do get changed. That's really American. My second voting issue is American improvement and the impact of this improvement, impact of these arguments. And American improvement, as my partner came up to you and showed you, it comes from innovation, it comes from growth, and it all stems from philanthropy. And that really wasn't adequately refuted. I really didn't get a refutation to the philanthropy argument. I don't know if you got it, judges, but the idea of American improvement and innovation is this. If we can have two different worlds. We have here the affirmation world. And in their affirmation world, let's take things to the extreme. It's really evened out, and there's not any disparity, and everyone makes the $40,000. My partner came up here and showed you, look, if the converse is true, everyone makes $40,000. No one's going to take that risk. Who's going to take out an $80,000 PC, or to build the idea of a PC? Who's going to take those risks? No one. If no one takes those risks, we're never going to grow as a country. We will never grow as a country if we don't take risks. But these risks come from financial stability. And financial stability comes from the higher echelon of society. And we're not saying only the higher echelon of society innovates and creates, but we also said the higher echelon of society funds money to those who want to innovate and create. And they, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has given tons of money to people who have had ideas and who have tried to fund opportunities. And that was something that really wasn't refuted adequately. So that's our world, the idea where there's innovation and growth. Now, that was their world, where there's no innovation and growth. Let's look at our world. Our world has those billionaires, the jobs and the Gates, but they can fund those projects, and they can create themselves, and they can fund other people to create. To create products that all Americans use. Most Americans use Facebook. Most Americans use a PC. Most Americans use the products that were created through philanthropy and through the higher echelon of society. My last voting issue is this, it's my favorite argument, the idea of self-betterment. I really got no refutation to this. I got no refutation to the idea that we build parks, we build museums, we build libraries for people to go out and better themselves. The idea that, look, we don't hand someone a welfare check, we don't want to hand people money, we say, here's an opportunity, go better yourself. This is something that is integral to today's debate, and I want us to win on this. It's the idea that we as an American country have this stratification. But with that stratification, we have a very American ideal, and that's the self-betterment ideal. Andrew Carnegie was at the highest of the high in his society and at his time. But he said, you know what, I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to philanthropy. He built those museums, he built those libraries, he built those parks. I'm glad I can go out in my beautiful country and better myself. I don't want to just be handed a check and say, here's your betterment. I want to improve myself. That's American. Vote on that. Thank you.
Thanks, guys, and thank you once again to my partner. So just a quick roadmap for the speech. I'll first be going over the neg block, some of their contentions, then moving on to our case, how it still stands, and then finally on to some voter issues to end the round. So basically, in their first contention, they say that we can't innovate without means. However, if you look at all of the examples that they brought up, all these very affluent people, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, they stated that these people rose in society because they accumulated means, which basically proves that you need means to move up society in the first place. However, if the lower echelon of society, if these are people who are truly brilliant, but just not receiving the funds to innovate or move up in society, the fact is that they just won't. They won't have those means. Their second contention is a philanthropy, and they use a school analogy. So basically, I just want to clear the affirmative stance. And I thought we made this very clear in our first speech too, is that we aren't we're not arguing for a welfare state. They brought up the example of handing someone a welfare check. And again, we're not saying that people should be handed money, but instead we're saying that everyone should be given equal opportunity, as there's a huge wealth divide in our nation today. And it impacts the lives of everyone. I'm sorry, I do have something to get through, but at the end I'll get to you if I can. So again, they gave the school analogy, how maybe their school isn't the most affluent, but they still have great opportunities, and we agree. A lot of schools are the same way. But the fact of the matter is that we're talking about the poorest of poor schools that just can't get these funds. And that is unfair to those brilliant minds that they were talking about, such as Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates. The fact of the matter is that these people can't move up in society. They can't innovate. They can't provide a better standard for themselves or their family that they have to support if there's such a divide, if the schools aren't getting the funding for a comprehensive education. Sorry, again, I'll get to it. So then they go over our case, and basically they say that if we have equal opportunity, or that we do have equal opportunities, they made that very clear. That but the fact of the matter is that if we have such equal opportunities, then why is there such a huge gap in the wealth today? As they've clearly proved before, it took Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates the means to move up society. So if this is true, then obviously the huge gap is not going to lead to equal opportunity, as they've proven for us. To repeat our second contention, they believe that protests are very good. They give the example of the American Revolution. However, the American Revolution is very different to the Occupy Wall Street movement. If you all observe, the American Revolution was clearly defined, the objectives, as the Occupy Wall Street didn't have the same clear objectives. Furthermore, the American Revolution was again organized better, whereas the Occupy Wall Street and the American Revolution, of course, had proper rhetoric of why we are being treated unfairly and why we deserve a democratic government. The Occupy Wall Street movements have been thoroughly inconsistent, have led to civilian violence when it is not needed, as opposed to the American Revolution, where people fought in wars and intended to harm each other, as opposed to creating harm in cities to the innocent. And also, the Occupy Wall Street doesn't really have clear rhetoric at all. They don't have clear goals. Now their third refutation. I'm sorry, I only have a minute left. So their third refutation to our third contention was that universities do have the means in order to sustain those who don't have financial aid. However, if you look, there's very limited funds and a lot of young Americans who deserve this. Therefore, we also see an income disparity gap with the amount of funds given and the amount of deserving Americans who've worked hard their entire high school career. And not all of them are going to get that equal opportunity to go to Harvard University. Now, finally on to voters. Now, I have basically two main voters, and that is fairness and morality. Now, when we look to fairness, we want to look to equal opportunity, as we have showed that equal opportunity was the intention of our founding fathers, not necessarily equal income, which the neg seems to think that we're advocating for. No, that's not at all. We don't believe that is, of course, a reality. But we do believe that there should be equal opportunity. Second is morality. We're not saying that we should uphold a welfare state, but we should look to a divide. And so on that point, as I asked to value the merit of an American over their granted privileges, I urge a very strong vote in the affirmation. Thank you all very much. And thank you.